With your current events activity coming due pretty soon, we're going to walk through just a few of the some of the basic elements of it to be sure that you know what it is you're doing. So the big picture of it is that you are preparing for how you will address difficult topics with your students. It's easy to tell someone, oh, when I talk to them, I'll just tell them that. This exercise requires you to use the specific words that you will use. So you'll really have to think them through and help guide them through a concept that is controversial. I particularly picked the Syrian refugee crisis because it's not here in North America and South America. So it's not directly impacting us, but that can certainly lead to discussions of events that are directly impacting us. So we know that students are going to be coming from all kinds of different backgrounds. They will have heard their parents, their families, maybe listen to the news, discuss some of the things. They may already have a set perception in mind of what it means to be an immigrant or a refugee. And sometimes they don't understand the difference between the two. So we want to be sure that they are able to differentiate in that in social studies. So a few things that you're going to read first. One of those is that you would view this short Vimeo, which is learning about the Syrian refugee crisis. It's from 5 years ago, but it still is very relevant. I'd also like for you to take a look at this, at Facing History and Ourselves, which is a great source, but Teaching Current Events is specifically about global immigration. There are some different articles down here that you can explore, which I would really encourage you to do, such as different perspectives on migrant detention. That's a sad situation. Why do people migrate? Which is very relevant to refugees, some particular stories down here. So I suggest you read through at least a few of those articles. And then this one that will be specific to your 7th grade as you get into the activity with them. This is not a particularly long article, but it's these students addressing these 10 areas that our students might not really think about. Now I'm going to close these tabs. So after you have viewed those, another place that you're going to need to look will be the standards for 7th grade social studies. And you're going to pay particular attention to 7.1, which is all of these, 7.3, and 7.5, because you're going to choose one from each of these. For example, 7.5, you might choose 7.5.2, describe how cultural diffusion, both voluntary and forced, impacts society. So in this case, they would be looking at society in Syria and places in the region. 7.3, they might be looking at the political map. And remember that the political map is different from the physical map. I remember it as political map has to do with politics, and politics have to do with people. So it would be people created things rather than mountains and rivers. It would be states and counties and latitude and longitude, concepts like that. And 7.1, you've got 6 options here. So you could explain something to do with major cultural regions. And those are just examples of things that you could do. Now, once you've done that, you're going to begin your script. You are the teacher, and you're going to write it like a script with your exact words. You want to guide your students using appropriate language and help them understand what you expect them to do, and give them the parameters within which you expect to work. And that includes these civic dispositions, which we will scroll to the end here and look at. This comes from a textbook. that I've used bits from before. I found it very helpful. So these 10 civic commitments, you don't have to say civic commitment number 4, civic mindedness. There are times when citizens should place the common good. You could just reference it and say, remember, civic mindedness means that we put the common good above our own interests. Just give them a reminder like that. You'll need to include that in your speech, in your lesson, in your script. And we're trying to get our students to engage in higher level thinking skills and also be at least somewhat empathetic, because refugees are leaving for pretty terrible reasons. Now that you've identified your one substandard from each standard, you're also going to reference in your script, and you don't have to say in 7.1.3 when we look at blah 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 blah. You don't have to give the standard. You can maybe one of your standards had to do with looking at the religions in the region, and you would just mention that they will need to consider the relevance that religion has among the refugees, for example. It can be just a casual reference to it, but you do need to state it somewhere in your script so that the students are aware of it. Another thing let's see, before you, once you've done that, you're going to introduce your students in how to doing a quick write. And it's important that you have them do this quick write before you even mention refugees or immigration or emigration. Ask them to do a quick write, just listing the steps they went through to get ready for school that morning until they arrived at school. Give them about 3 to 4 minutes. Then you're going to introduce your concept of refugees and get them interested in what life might be like for people who are their own ages within a refugee camp. So you might have them consider the very crowded conditions, limited resources. That might be a good time for them to do a turn and talk, or to add to their quick write about some of the considerations that the refugee young people would have as well. So get them thinking at least about the concept of refugees. And the next thing that students are going to do is develop a concept ladder. And a concept ladder, the one that I have attached for you, looks like this. So we start at the bottom with the bigger and broader, and then work our way up to the more specific. In this concept ladder, you are going to have the students scaffold this information beginning at the bottom with the what, the where from, where to, when. So it's getting more and more specific. So the last one is why, and then the top one is the hopeful outcome. In other words, if things worked out very well for the refugees, what would happen to them after they were able to leave the camps? You know, what would be a really positive outcome for them? After they do the concept ladder, you're going to give them directions for creating their own podcast, just a short podcast of about 500 words. I would recommend that they work in pairs or small groups, but that's up to you as the teacher. Let them know that they're going to record themselves on the class tablets, and their podcasts will come from their concept ladders. So they may want to be somewhat detailed in their concept ladders so they have plenty of information for their podcast. They must begin with an introduction and end with a conclusion. Their introduction should not be an introduction to the project. Not, I'm in Miss Davis's class and this is my podcast about Syrian refugees. Or if you chose to do refugees from another country, that's fine as well. That's not what their introduction should be. It should be an introduction that is more specific to their concept, which is about the refugees from a particular country. So they could possibly give an example of a way to introduce it, make it engaging to another student their age. Have you ever wondered why? Or you might find it hard to believe, but some people our age in other parts of the world, or give some kind of an example for them. And also a conclusion, the same. Well, that's all I have. Or so that's the end of my presentation on refugees. It needs to be an actual conclusion that concludes their information. So it should come from the information that they have provided. And you, as the teacher, are giving them example of these. Then you'll give them directions about how they will share podcasts in groups and how they'll discuss their findings. And when I say in groups, well, if they've already been working in groups, then their group might be that they each present theirs to the whole class, but that's up to you, the teacher. And then the students are going to have a grand discussion, an open discussion in which they need to understand how their choice of words and the way that they speak to others is very important. And this would be another good place to remind them of their civic dispositions. You will, let's see. Yeah, I think that was about the last thing I had to share then, that their grand discussion should be respectful, and that it's all right to disagree with someone as long as it's done in a considerate and appropriate way. So for your score sheet, the standards that you're going to write out here, for example, 7.1.5, and then write it out. Those are worth 2 points each. And again, you need to weave those into your part of the script, what you are telling the students, just casually, not word for word by any means. Okay, so you can see how the points are broken down here, and that as you are explaining your expectations for them for the grand discussion, notice that that's going to be pretty heavily weighted here. So that is 20% of the overall grade of this. So I'm excited to see what you come up with and how you are able to use your own language to encourage your students to have appropriate kinds of discussion. We are a global society, and if you follow social media, you know that a lot of people do not know how to have appropriate, respectful discussions over difference. So that's what we want to model for our students and what we want them to learn. All right, I hope you enjoy this assignment and get a good deal out of it.